Alrighty, hi Rosie. How's
Hi,
it going?
I'm alright. How are you?
Good. I'm gonna do that awkward thing now where I ask if we're live. I think we're live. Let me just check on the stream. So you're in the UK right now, right?
I am, yeah. I'm
Cool.
home with my parents.
Awesome. Oh yeah, we're live. Awesome. Well, can you tell the audience a little bit about who you are? Just a brief thing. We'll get to your actual life story later, but
Sure.
yeah.
Um, just tell me to stop whenever I've said enough.
Sounds good.
Um, so my name is Rosie Bennet. I'm 24 years old, which feels like an age. And I am a classical guitarist. I have been playing classical guitar for forever. And I recently started writing a blog. I like to write about music education and everything that comes with it from my own personal experience. Um, yeah, that's me, I guess.
Awesome. Cool. So hi everybody watching. Welcome to another messy desk. I keep forgetting to say the actual name of the show. I'm really excited to have Rosie here. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And if you guys could tell me if the audio levels are weird, that would be appreciated. If you have questions for Rosie or for me, your host, just put them in the comments. We'll try to answer all the questions. And yeah, enjoy the show. And as always, there's a link to donations, and please hit the share button so that Rosie can get heard all over. Um, and yeah, smash that like button and all that stuff. So, Rosie, what are you going to play for us now before we talk a bit more?
I'm just gonna play Julia Florida by Augustin Barrios Mangoy.
Awesome. Let's hear some barrios.
You ready? Ready? Okay.
Yeah, we're ready. Very nice.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Beautiful.
And sit more normally now.
Yes, you can now be a normal human rather than a guitarist.
Exactly.
Yes. Nice. Well, lots of people are enjoying it. Adam says beautiful. Lara says gorgeous, Rosie. Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
Bravo.
Amazing.
Nice job from Roger. Um, awesome. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good classic.
Yeah, I think people always like to hear it. It's something super nice to play in concerts.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It sounds like
it's
it would
also
be fun to play.
it's super fun to play, and also I really like playing it in the beginning of a concert or like right at the end as an encore, because I think it's a really especially like those first couple of bars are really perfect for like kind of testing the room. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can practice in the room, the hall before you play or the space that you're playing in, but it's so different. The energy is so different when the audience is in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just those first couple of like wash notes, it's the perfect time to sort of see what kind of feedback you're getting back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I really love that piece. I think it's like one of the most beautiful things ever written.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I use Junto a Generalife, the Rodrigo piece, for the same reason. I mean, it
Mm.
has a bit more, I don't know, flashy bits, but at the same time, it has that opening where you can do that testing
Yeah, definitely.
of the space. And yeah, it's always also nice to something with a bit of start with something with a bit of space too, so you can kind of feel your, especially your right hand,
Mm.
feel how your attack is, how your nails feel in the room, all that kind of thing. Yes.
Great. See how nervous you are. Lovely.
Exactly.
Love
Uh,
it. Best
oh
thing to
man.
put at the beginning of a program, like "Duh."
Yeah.
All you get is like that nail feedback on the strings.
Yeah, well, I mean, the right hand always does weird things when you're like a little bit nervous, and then you kind of have to, yeah, see how it, how it, yeah, reacts basically to
I
what you do.
love. Someone told me this is probably like total rubbish, but I love those kind of technique things that are like total placebo. And one thing someone told me is like if you put all of your fingers and your thumb on the same string and hold it there for 10 seconds, your hand naturally stays still. Someone was like, Ida Presti used to do this before every concert. You should do that. And honestly, I used to do that and believe that would stop my hand jittering. So I'm currently on the lookout for another placebo trick.
Mm.
Um,
It's like people who have
yeah,
to eat a specific thing before they play.
I think yeah, a lot of people like get into rituals and stuff. I
Yeah.
feel like that's quite a good. Well, it's good and bad, isn't
Well,
it?
yeah, I mean, it's good if it helps you as a placebo for sure. I mean, I think at the point, even the most like skeptical, hardline materialist atheist like myself thinks at some point, screw it, I'm gonna do what I have to like feel comfortable in the concert, even if it's a
Yeah,
placebo. But but then the problem is if you can't do your ritual and that like throws you off.
absolutely.
So.
It's really tricky because one of my only real rituals before I go on stage is I like to talk to people
Hmm.
backstage. And that presents like a number of problems. You never know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
Could be someone who's like really horrible,
Right. Yeah.
or who constantly asks you like, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous?" And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate that question because part of me wants to say like, "Yeah, I'm really nervous. I want to be honest," but then I try to convince myself. I try to always say like, "No, I'm not nervous. I can't wait to get on the stage." It's it's a very strange ritual to have. But you know why I developed it actually? This is again, it's like something that comes from like the genesis of this idea is so silly. But when I was at school, so I went to music school, and we were lucky to have a lot of concerts given by these incredible artists. And Radu Lupu, the pianist, came to play, and I was working as one of the backstage people, and he was horrible. I was a child. I was maybe 11 or 12, and I really looked like I had a baby face. No one would ever say anything just horrible. I didn't look. I didn't invite evilness. And he just kind of shouted at me about a chair or something. And I was like, "Ugh, what am I meant to do?" And so after that, I thought like, okay, my plan is that I'm always going to be this super chill person. So that even if I play a really bad concert, like a shockingly bad concert, people will be like, "Oh, she was lovely."
That's a good plan because I mean nobody is like bats 100 at playing well, you know.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so I mean it's better to cover your bases for sure. I mean I always yeah I feel like one of the lessons musicians should learn is that like it's just better to be a good person because half the time you're gonna rely on that to keep your connections and like you know not that you should do it
Yeah,
cynically but like it's probably better to treat people well when you're in a profession where you rely on your social network.
for sure. I think especially if you play guitar, because
Yeah.
I understand that the other string worlds, or like for instance the piano world, is so massive that you can kind of get away with being nasty to people. Not nasty. He wasn't nasty, He was just
Yeah, it's just
short.
grumpy or whatever.
Um,
Yeah.
like you can kind of get away with being not so lovely. Let's put it like that.
So
And you will
diplomatic,
still
Rosie.
be liked by people who are in like it seems a little bit more distant in a way, like
Mm.
those worlds, the concert bookers in places like Carnegie Hall and Cadogan Hall or Wigmore Hall, all these people. It's not usually such a close knit circle as
Mm.
the classical guitar festival world is. Ultimately, I think in the end, if you're invited to classical guitar festivals, it will mainly be because you are friendly, because it will be your friends inviting you, because we
Hmm.
kind of all know each other.
Yeah, or
um,
people who like find you lovely to be around and are like, well, we'd have this person because of their musical ability, but also we would like to hang out with them for a weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a big part of the festival dynamic. So,
Hmm. But I mean, even getting outside of the classical guitar world, if you're in your own community, like playing gigs that aren't necessarily classical guitar related, um,
mm,
I think we rely as guitarists a lot on our own communities. So and on our regions, and developing a good network in those areas because we have to kind of cobble together a living from a lot of different sort of ways of performing and doing
yeah,
work. So, yeah. Anyways, I guess that's a pessimistic way of saying you need the people around you, basically.
yeah, and also it's fun to be a nice person.
True. Yes.
It's a lot more fun, I think,
Yeah. Definitely.
than being nasty. Although there is something slightly appealing about leaving like a tail of destruction behind you. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
but
No.
obviously it's nice.
Sometimes. Yeah. It depends. Sometimes depends on the circumstance. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. There are those moments where you're like, well, should I say what I really think or not? Well,
Exactly.
yeah.
Start this off in a good way. It's nice to be nice.
Yeah,
Please
for
be
sure.
nice to me.
Well, now that we know your life plan is to be nice to people, do we really need to know your life story? I mean,
Wow.
is it a history of niceness?
Wow. Um, people that have heard this story before will be rolling their eyes. I almost feel the rolling of eyes happening. Um, but my music education story is quite long.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how much time we have.
We
No, I'm
have
kidding.
all
It's
the
not.
time in the world. I mean, this is a long show. Usually, I outlast most of my viewers, so
Okay, sure. So how can I say? Like, I got into guitar in a really unspectacular way. I remember always feeling quite insecure about that, especially in my teenage years, because lots of people had these stories like, oh, I went to this violin concert when I was 2 years old, and I toddled up to the front of the stage, and I couldn't take my eyes off this violinist, or like these crazy stories. And my story was kind of like I moved schools, and they had music in the curriculum, and they were like, "Would you like to play an instrument?" And I sort of thought, "Yeah, okay, fine." And then I had to choose an instrument, and guitar was like one of the only instruments I knew of. So I thought, well, I'll just say guitar. Started guitar. Had a teacher who was really quite serious. Is that a Duval?
it's this is what is this? This is this is what the heck is it called? I'm trying to remember the name. It's escaping me. I bought it yesterday. It's because my fiance poured it for me, so I'm not remembering exactly which bottle it was from.
Where's a Belgian beer?
Yeah, it's a Belgian beer, Affligem, or is it Dutch?
African.
Affligem, yeah,
I think African is Belgian.
I think so. Yes, it's
Very
very
nice.
delicious. Yes,
A triple.
yes, indeed, Affligem
Fancy.
triple. Yeah,
Nice. Miss it. I miss the Belgian beer.
I live in the Netherlands. I have to take advantage of this.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's one of the best things about living
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Rain and Belgian beer.
Yeah, exactly. And all the bikes, you get fit
And
and
bikes,
stuff.
yes, I love biking. It's true. In this coronavirus crisis, it's actually quite nice to be able to get on the bike and get outside the city in 10 minutes.
Well, I can imagine.
Yeah. Anyways, back to your school story.
Um, so I knew what guitar was. I started with a teacher who was quite serious about pedagogy, and he kind of used me as like a guinea pig for his new method, which was it comes to be more important later in my life, but he had these sort of books for early progress where he would play something with you. So from the very beginning, you were sort of doing sight reading and ensemble work. But obviously, it didn't really make you want to practice at all because things were like easy enough to definitely sight read. I mean, I think I just sight read for like the 4 years that I was with him at that school. I only sight read stuff. I actually didn't know that you had to practice. This was a notion that was new to me. Um, and practiced and I got kind of accustomed, like that was the good part, was I sort of got accustomed to playing with somebody. So I was never playing alone. It was always like chamber music style. And then what happened? So um, he sort of thought that I was pretty good, that I kind of, I came to it quite naturally. And my parents were like, well, have we paid him this semester? Like, why is he telling us this? My parents were generally quite skeptical. Obviously, they never heard me play anything, so how would they ever know if I had any talent in it at all?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he taught at a music school which was quite close to where we lived. The system is quite hard to explain in the UK. We don't have a lot of independent music schools. I think there are 5. And I ended up eventually auditioning for the Yehudi Menrin School of Music in Stoke-Dagenham, which is actually in sort of it's in the same county as where I grew up. And that was sort of my introduction into what music could be like as a real life, as like a career. It was like Hogwarts, but for music, and they kind of made you feel like that as well. There was a lot of this element of like having a calling or like being a chosen person. The school had very few students. When I joined, there were 60 students from the age of 7 until 19. And I kind of got accepted. I remember in the audition, there were all these like alarm bells ringing for me. For instance, the question, how many hours a day do you practice? And I can remember me like sitting there thinking, hours in a day. And I remember thinking like, okay, I'm gonna have to wing this. And I said, I think on a good day, I'll usually do half an hour because I thought like that's loads. I mean, at that age, you're going to school for 5 hours a day, and that already feels like an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought half an hour a day, chill, that'll be fine. They sort of laughed and thought, well, okay, she has no idea what she's talking about. But somehow I ended up going there. It's hard to say. I felt very strongly that I should be there. Sometimes in your life you get this moment where you are in a place or with a certain person and you feel like the earth around you has stopped and you are like totally focused in this moment. And I felt very much like that when I went there. The reality of life at a music school is quite ruthless, I would say. I think if you come into it having had musical parents or having any idea really of what a life in music is, aside from like a couple of pop stars that you know of, then maybe you have a better grounding to go to a music school. I think I found it very difficult because I hadn't had a musical upbringing. Everything was new to me. And I was very impressionable. Um, which I understand is sort of, that's nobody's fault. Obviously, when you learn things for the first time, you learn it in a kind of dogmatic way, especially when you're a kid, you're like a sponge. And I think I picked up quite a lot of problematic behaviours around music when I was at this school, but not necessarily at the fault of anyone there in particular. Just the idea that, from the age of 11, you're sort of playing concerts every half term and you're having assessments and you're playing, and that your sort of social structure in a school is built around your talents, which it's not normal. It's not something that you're accustomed to as a kid growing up. I think intelligence very rarely comes into the popularity game in schools. It usually, if you're very intelligent, it sort of sets you automatically on a lower level in your hierarchy of popularity at high school. But this place is, well, music schools and specialist schools in general, I think, one of the weird things to contend with is that you are sort of ranked by your peers in terms of how popular you are is sort of determined by your talents or how successful you are in music, which is kind of weird. It's like being the best wizard. So I won't dwell too much on it unless you have like a lot of thoughts about music schools, but we can go into that later. I will just briefly go through the next years of my life. So I was at the school for 7 years. I learned a lot, and I grew also quite a big ego, like massive ego, incredibly fragile inside.
It's great that you admit it.
Fun. I'm sure there will be some people who are very happy that I'm admitting this now.
Rosie Bennet announces.
But it's not crazy, Like, I mean, I'd seen how people acted like these genius types, and I was like, when I leave school, I am going to be a genius. So I left school. I went to study in The Hague with Zoran Dukic, and I, yeah, I was just like so pompous, like so pompous. It was incredible.
How did that
Zoran
go
had
over in the Netherlands?
Sorry.
How did that go over in the Netherlands?
Um, well, actually, with Dutch people relatively well. I actually,
Oh, good.
I mean, I actually still have quite a lot of really good friends from my first year.
Mm-hmm.
Especially the people who sort of saw my breakdown. I feel like those people I'm super close with still.
So what was the
So,
breakdown?
well, okay, so people give you like these, they sort of feature spot in your playing. And my thing had always been people were like, okay, your technique's not very good, but your musicality is incredible. And your tone is incredible. And I remember walking into my first lesson with Zora, and he said, right, you know how he is, he's super like more charisma than anyone I've ever seen. He was filing his nails, sitting there with a super floppy body, like super relaxed. And I was playing something, and he said to me, we need to work on everything. Your tone is bad, your sound, everything is bad. Your technique is horrible.
Also, Zoran
And
just says what he thinks. I
okay,
mean,
I'm going to take this in like a business way. I know that he was probably going to be mean. Um, Not because of him, but I figured like there would be a lot of things to change. But the thing is with having such a big ego is that you're basically just inflating something that's really quite empty inside. So I didn't really have any self-confidence at all. I had nothing that I thought like, oh, I can really do that. So I would do these performances and everyone would say like, oh, it's super good. But because I messed up 2 notes or because I didn't feel good on stage, I would come off stage and be like crying and super dramatic, like you can't imagine, super dramatic, like wailing, like a banshee, because I felt like, oh god, it's just so awful. And also, I mean, okay, we can joke about it, but at the time it felt very real because if you've always based your self-worth, or if you've been taught to base your self-worth on how well your performances go, which is kind of how a music school works,
mm-hmm.
And then you keep repeatedly playing these concerts that you don't know if they're good or not because you haven't got your teacher anymore to tell you. You've got a different teacher who you haven't really learned to trust yet. You're not going to put your whole life in someone else's hands suddenly. And I just lost the plot. I had no idea what I was doing anymore. I was obsessed with right and wrong because it had always felt to me like there definitely wasn't a right way, but there were a lot of wrong ways.
Right.
That kind of criticism, like very detailed, pinpointed criticism in your playing, really leads you when you're young to think like, okay, well, this is a pattern, And it almost felt like there was this one little path that I kind of had to jump on through my pieces to do it right, and everything else was wrong. and I was just so lost. I always learn pieces really quickly. This is something that has bothered me greatly in these years because I would learn pieces in like a week, and then I would think, well, that can't be right.
Right.
um, which was kind of disturbing, and ultimately, like all these different things, I was in a relationship at the time that wasn't very healthy for me. I had a different lifestyle at that moment. I was spending a lot of my life in jazz clubs into the early hours of the morning, having a great time, doing all kinds of wonderful things, but really like suffering with guitar. And because I divined my whole personality on my playing, it felt like I just didn't exist anymore. So I had a kind of mental breakdown, I suppose you can call it. At the time, I wasn't really sure what it was. I had my first panic attack. The people from the front desk in The Hague that are still there remember saying to me, "Breathe, just breathe," and I know, just impossible. And why did that change? So my previous teacher, before Zoran, had organised for us to go to a festival in Spain with René Izquierdo, the Cuban guitarist who teaches in Milwaukee.
Who's coming on the show in like a couple weeks?
Sorry?
Who's coming on the show in a couple weeks? Just as a shout out to people.
René,
yeah.
Definitely tune in for that. René's an amazing person.
Yeah.
They're one of the best, really one of the best people in history of people. And so we met him in the Iserlohn, and we'd had some really good classes, and our teacher organised for us to go to his little festival. So I went with a couple of friends from school. I think there were 8 of us in that first year, and we had technique every day, which was incredible. There were so many amazing things about that festival. If you are doubting, probably not this summer because I think nothing's happening, but next summer if you're doubting about a festival to go to, no doubt book your place as early as you can on that festival. It's in Carrion de los Condes, the Camino Artist project, and René does a course there. You have technique every morning, which is just insane. I didn't even know what technique was when I first went on that course. And I soon found out, because also another moment for a breakdown when you have been playing guitar for 11 years and suddenly realise that you can't even play, like, your fingers walking across the strings. I mean, I was a live wire, seriously. I was ready for anything, like ready to fall off anything. And I remember I went to my first lesson with René on that course, and I was going to play the 4th etude by Villa-Lobos. And René said, "Right, so what are you going to play today?" And I just started crying, and I didn't stop crying for a full hour. And René didn't really know me, so he was terrified, like, oh my god, I've just broken her. Like, I just asked her what she's going to play, and she's, like, totally broken down. So that was terrifying for him. And I kind of explained that things were not working out with Zoran. Again, it's something that he's totally absented from any fault in that. It was very difficult for me. I used to have a lesson basically every 2 days, and I'd had a guitar lesson every 2 or 3 days for 7 years. And then I came to The Hague, and then Zoran would be gone for 2 weeks because he's a famous guitarist. He would be gone playing concerts.
Oh, Renée's watching.
Sorry?
Renee is watching. Hi, Renee.
Ah, hi.
We're just talking. We're talking about Carrion, which I went to Carrion last year, and it was amazing. So.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah,
it's great. And those technique workshops were great also, every morning.
Yeah, they're rough. You're like, I think I'm pretty good at this. And then you go there and you're like, oh.
Well, it's the thing that was nice was that he went very fast through a lot of the essentials, so you kind of see where your weak points are, It was very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And a lot of different things that you didn't even really know was like technique. That was what I thought. I was like, whoa, it's not just speed and like shifting. It's loads of other things that I also can't do. Great. But wait, where did we get to? Sorry, I'm really glad.
So yeah, we're really getting your life story, but this is good. I feel like now people know you very well. It's good.
This is what I think about. This is all my friends rolling their eyes all the time.
Yeah. I'm sure a few of them are in the chat. You were telling Renee about how it wasn't working out.
Oh yeah, it wasn't working out, and that was the reason. It was because Zoran was touring. You know, of course he didn't really have time to like hold my hand and go through every piece with me and tell me what was right or wrong for every single note.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No. But I was kind of like, why not? I'm used to this. I was
Right.
pretty just
Yeah, your
about
previous experience had led you to believe that that's what a teacher would do, right? It's just like hold your
yeah,
hand all the time.
exactly. So, and it's that kind of thing. If you learn to walk and someone's holding your hand all the time, you will never learn to walk on your own because you know you can rely on that other person.
Hmm.
Uh, so by trying to do a good thing, it kind of messed me up for for quite a while.
Yeah,
um, but yeah, and I think actually Zoran was pretty. We actually have a good relationship whenever I see him. There's nothing, there's no bad blood at all.
yeah. Hmm.
I think I was really confusing for him. I was really like this weird enigma because on the one hand, in the lessons, I would say these things to him that were like incredibly hoity-toity. He'd be like, "Why don't you do this different fingering?" And I'd say, "Because it's not in the style," and stuff like that. Like, I was just horrible. So he was like, "Whoa, I need to teach her a lesson." But then I would do these concerts, and then I would be like bawling my eyes out, and he'd be like, "What? It was fine. I don't know what you're crying about. Like, what?"
Yeah.
Um, so I think he just always kind of was like slightly puzzled by me. He really did try to help. I have a score upstairs of Sonatina Meridional, which has his markings in it. Like Zora has this super heavy hand, so it's always like really heavy markings in the page. And he went through this. He went through this whole sonata with me and worked out loads of things I could do. But you know, the thing is, I just felt lost already there.
Yeah.
Um,
It sounds like it
I
didn't have
just
so much to do with the actual technique or something. It had a lot to do with a lot of other things.
Yeah, because my actually I have recordings from that year, and my playing actually doesn't. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Actually, my playing was all right. It was fine, but it was just that connection that I had with it. I think I massively had like personal experience as one of the indicators of how a performance had gone, and so I would sort of feel elated, and then I would see my teacher, and I would ask him like, "How did it go?" And if he said it was good, then I'd be like, okay, it was great. I can relax. This is
Right.
great. And then I kind of lost all those indicators, you know. Like you're also, you know, 18, 19. You're massively malleable in terms of your personality. And I was
Hmm.
meeting all new cool people and taking little bits of their personalities for myself. And you know, it was just like a really, it was a really tricky time.
Yeah.
uh,
I have the feeling that I mean, I envy people who started really, really young because I started playing guitar when I was 19 and classical guitar when I was 20. So really
yeah,
late, especially for now doing my master's and everything. But like, in some ways, I can see the benefit of not growing up with the need to be like praised or something like you were talking about, you know? Because like, I mean, the first 4 or 5 years you play guitar, it sucks. You know, 4 or 5 years, it's generally not very good. And doing that as an adult, kind of, I sort of didn't have the option to make my whole self worth based around that. You know,
yeah.
so I don't know.
I think it has a lot to do with the rhetoric.
Right.
Um, I think that a lot of classical musicians, maybe even if it's like a slightly subconscious thing, are aware that classical music is not like a traditional route to go down in terms of career. And I think that they try to make, with good intentions, try to make a bigger thing, you know, this sort of honor or duty idea out of it. You get a lot of that in music, you know, this higher
Hmm.
purpose. And I think that people maybe don't realize how much as a kid you see how people act and you
Yeah.
sort of copy that in your own life. I don't know. I mean,
How
it's
much you
hard to
take it
say.
on? Yeah. I mean,
And the reason I say that most people, I mean, really most people are absented from any blame from it is because, of course, when you learn something that you know nothing about, it's always going to be dogmatic. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you're the freest person in the world. It's always going to be dogmatic because it's your first reactions, your first little like pieces of knowledge on which you base everything else.
yeah.
Um, so that always makes it hard. And I think as a teacher now, it makes me super aware a lot more than the job is worth almost. I think so much about teaching. because I'm so worried that I will give these strange behaviors to the kids that I'm teaching just because of the way that I am or the little things that I say.
Yeah.
Um,
I have the feeling as a teacher that a lot of teaching is actually about how you help your students have a good relationship with themselves and their playing, right? So
yeah,
for me, I spend a lot of time actually, like, it depends on the person or the kid, but I spend a lot of time trying to help my students feel not divorced from how they feel about their playing, but just accepting of it and not placing a whole lot of need on it to always be what they expect or want it to be, you know? Because even if you can be like successful and work really hard and go a long ways with that attitude, I think in the end it's self-destructive, you know?
mm,
To need things to turn out a certain way with your playing, or
yeah,
or to have expectations, because also your perception, I mean, everyone says this all the time, but your perception is different than the audience's and then your teachers and your friends. And so, I mean, it's good
yeah,
to self-evaluate, but at a certain point it becomes kind of toxic, you know?
yeah.
So,
I think it's the way, I think that also like sort of the way that you as a person are quite belittled by the idea that music is something much bigger than you. I feel like that's not really a healthy concept for kids to grow up with.
right.
Um, because ultimately you can also just play pieces however you want and just walk on stage and have a good time, and people will usually enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's what the job is, then technically, why do we create all of these little laws? I know that there are some rules about rhetoric, or there are lots of treaties that tell us how to play certain pieces of music, or we can get clues from harmony, or all these little things. But also, you can also just not do any of that stuff, still have a good time. The audience will still have a good time.
Well, and
Um,
conversely, you can do all the right things, and
yeah,
in the end there's going to be a group of people who think what you're doing is wrong, which is good because it means that we have multiple ways of viewing it, right? But like,
exactly.
but you're not, if you break yourself trying to do all the things that externally are being told to you is correct rather than
Yeah,
artistically internally, then you're going to end up like probably disappointing a lot of people anyways, and not necessarily, and also not expressing yourself. So I mean,
yeah, and also making it a really stressful thing. Um, I think I feel really lucky that I played concerts before I went to music school. Concerts where you probably see it like, where you have a kid who's so young that they don't even realize the gravity of the situation, and there'll be like 100 people sitting in the audience, and
yeah.
the kids like smiling at the audience, like trying to find their parents and just like staring their parents solid in the eyes for the whole thing. Like I definitely had that experience of playing concerts before I went to an environment where it was a lot more critiqued.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of learned very early on to develop that sort of sense of like, oh, this is super nice. Because obviously, because I was like a cute little kid and I was staring in the audience, people were smiling back. If I would do that now, people would be terrified. But I kind of like, I think the little connections that I made in the brain with performance at that age were all positive ones.
For sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
which is why mostly when I'm on stage, I always enjoy it.
Hmm.
And I actually have that feeling of sort of like, oh, you do want to go on stage, even if it makes you nervous. But I do have that feeling like I really enjoy it. Also, from nothing more than just the perspective of like sitting there. It's not necessarily because I have something important to share, or
Mm-hmm.
or it's not necessarily that. I do just love being there.
Yeah.
But almost so,
Cool.
that's
Um,
my life.
Kevin Lowe says, first Kevin says, what a drink. I think he's referring to your cocktail, which does look delicious.
Yeah, beautiful.
What is it? Is it a gin and tonic or what?
Yeah, it is
Ah,
with
nice.
raspberries and lemon in it.
Raspberries and lemon. Wow, very good. And then Kevin also says, curious to know what you guys think as teachers about your approach to maintain interest for young beginners. So, how do you maintain interest for young beginners, Rosie?
I think by being super enthusiastic about it myself. I
Okay.
think that um, the one thing I try to do, and also one of the things that I lifted from my first teacher is trying to make the guitar a part of something bigger. So, you can play pretty basic violin and join an amateur orchestra, but we don't have that. Guitar ensembles mostly, not always, but mostly lead to trauma because everything's out of tune and you spend your whole life trying to get all of your. Anyway, guitar ensemble can be fun, but it's nice to have little groups of chamber music. I really feel like that's so important. So
Mm-hmm.
when I have group classes, I always try and get kids learning different parts, even if they're just doing something really, really simple.
Mm-hmm.
I have like an arrangement of Julia Florida for 5 guitar parts where kids basically only have to play 2 notes per bar, just so they can feel like they make this massive musical thing together instead of just playing a little piece alone,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think it's part and parcel of learning, like learning to listen as well.
Yeah. On that note, I try to also play a lot with my students myself, even if they're playing classical rap, and especially kids who have family members who play guitar. Like a lot of people play guitar, so with a lot
Yeah,
of the students I have who are kids, I get them like in their little Carcassonne etude, I write the chords above, and I have their dad play the chords with them if he plays a few chords, or their mom or whoever. And that might seem kind of sacrilegious, but for kids, having a
no,
parent or a sibling to play with, it's like it makes a huge difference. Or just giving them
yeah,
little duets that you play with them in the lesson. And then also
yeah,
when you're trying to encourage them to perform, the fact that they have someone else on stage with them helps immensely. So,
yeah, definitely.
yeah.
And it's all part of that, just trying to make this environment around it that it's fun, that it's something you can share. I mean,
Hmm.
for a lot of kids that I teach, music is some kind of power. It's not necessarily expression, but it's something for you that you have that maybe your siblings don't
Hmm.
have. Something that you can work at and reasonably get better by, in a sort of linear way when you're younger. When you're learning simple things, you can kind of go as far as your own determination allows,
Hmm.
which is, I think, that's really powerful for kids, because obviously in a school system where things are quite regimented and you'll work through different tasks at different times and you can never really get ahead. But private lessons, when you're working with a kid one on one, it's all governed by how much work they do,
Yeah.
which I think is like a really powerful position to put kids in at that age, which is a feeling you don't have much when you're young.
Yeah. I also like to try to help them celebrate the small victories and enjoy
Yeah,
what you know, very consciously pointing out the improvements they've made. And that sounds like an obvious point, but like, you know, I'm not the kind of bubbly like kind of person. Like that's just not my personality. It's not how I teach either. And I think that different teachers work for different kids. But I think the kids that click with me are the ones who appreciate the like clear feedback and helping them enjoy what they're doing. That because kids are very critical with themselves, actually, sometimes surprisingly so. Um,
Mm.
so I don't know, but maybe that I don't know if that's true for all of them.
I think I do try to be critical because I think that a lot of kids are also used to that.
Right.
Um, I find especially in Belgium, actually,
Hmm.
because usually I'm teaching in Belgium, so I'm teaching also in French and in Dutch, which is kind of nasty for the brain sometimes.
Yeah, I can
Um,
imagine.
but I think it's quite good to be strict sometimes because kids are very used to being talked to in that way by their teachers,
Yeah.
um, which is something maybe we don't do a lot when we're being so concerned about kids' welfare. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's a balancing act, right? Yeah. It does depend on the context too, though, because like I think it's a cultural thing as well. Like in Vancouver, I had a lot of Canadian students and then also students of newly like new immigrants from Asia, from China, for example, kind of thing. So there were sort of different cultural aspects too in terms of like how much pressure the kids put on themselves, which just totally
yeah,
depends. It does depend on the family completely too, but here in the Netherlands it is different as well. And teaching in Dutch also it's a different. I don't know. The language you use also changes everything. So,
yeah, for sure. I
but
think
it's
French is a much sterner language than
right.
Dutch. Dutch is kind of like a. I find Dutch this sort of simple language. I mean, it's hard to say it. The
Hmm.
spec is difficult. It's
Yeah.
much easier in Belgium, by the way. If you move to Belgium, it's much easier, much closer to English.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, the
uh,
Dutch that I speak is very like, more Dutch sounding Dutch. Like when I go down to Maastricht for my classes with Carlo, I hear a completely different kind of Dutch. So,
it's
um,
I only have a couple of words that I say in a Dutch way. I think like Nederlands, Nederlands.
Nederlands. Well, we say Nederlands here. Nederlands, yeah.
Everyone laughs at me in Belgium when I say
Um,
Nederlands.
Renee Izquierdo says also trying to play arrangements of music that is more current to them. Yeah, I arrange a lot of pop music for my students, like a lot, a lot. And I arrange it in a way where it's actually very like notation based. all the dynamics are written and that kind of thing, just so that they still get used to having like an accurate representation of the musical structure in front of them, but it's still music they enjoy, right? Um, Juan Lopez is asking if you have any advice to teach a person with Asperger's. I have no experience with that or no expertise, but do you have any ideas, Rosie?
Um, I feel like generally you probably need to be quite flexible with their needs.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, especially in group classes, that's really the only experience that I've had of teaching kids with Asperger's, is that they find it very difficult to be part of the group. So, and pressure, at least in the cases that I've had, is immense. So it's you sort of need to try and tune your exercises so that you're not necessarily singling anybody out in your class.
Mm-hmm.
Try and make sort of group exercises. If you're teaching a kid on their own, probably appreciate that maybe they like the class a lot more than they're giving off, or that their emotions aren't as transparent as other kids' emotions are. I had a kid in my class last year who had Asperger's, and I thought that he hated my class and hated me. And at the end, his mum said, "I think he's really found his group of people in this class. He
Oh.
really loves this class." And I thought, like, okay, that's the you never really know. Um,
Yeah.
you never know sort of in general. You never know what kids are thinking, but but
Mm-hmm.
I think especially when you have learning disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think probably also understanding that even just any child, not all kids learn in a lexical way. So it's very difficult. Also, if you have a kid who has dyslexia, reading music can be really tough. So try and base your exercises around maybe not just lexical learning, but maybe audio learning or maybe visual learning, patterns in the hand. Um, there are all kinds of different ways, even that we, just as different people who are trying to do this as a career, different ways that we memorize things. I know that for me, I'm very audio visual, sort of on the on the left hand. Um, so yeah, just think that there's a lot of different ways of learning rather than just lexical.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult because we transmit music in a way where it's written down in our tradition at least, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really true though that people have different strengths. Like I always say this to my students, like you're not going to be bad at every single thing you need to be a musician. You might be bad at some of them, but those things you can train, right? Like maybe you're not great at reading, maybe you're not great at sight reading, maybe you're not great at rhythm, maybe your ear is not amazing, but you can train those things. But the thing is with a student, if they're really struggling with one way of learning a passage, I do try to change it, right? Like you said, do it by demonstrating the rhythm, by getting them to count, by having them sing, by showing them exactly the shape of the fingers. And then once you have that working for them, you can kind of say like, okay, so what I just showed you here, like physically, that's what that thing on the page looks like, and kind of help them so that when they encounter that piece of notation again, they have a different
Yeah,
tool to try to practice it. Yeah,
that's
it's
sort of what it is all the time, isn't it? It's like trying to equip them with the right tools to learn themselves eventually do things.
yeah. I prefer not to say the same thing over and over again, so I try to help my students learn ways to help themselves too. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anyhow, um, yes, and Renee says also familiarity with how different learning disabilities manifest. Awareness is key. Yeah, I don't know very much about that, but I think that would be really key, depending on what kind of learning challenges students have.
Yeah, and also probably understanding that for a lot of people with learning disabilities, the goal is different.
Yeah,
Um, your purpose as a teacher is very different in what you're mentoring. And for a lot of kids, it will be just purely enjoyment. And in order to have that enjoyment, they don't necessarily need to be doing a massive amount themselves.
hmm,
Um, so yeah, it's kind of just, I suppose, like rethinking your role, um, and what you're really trying to transmit or what you're trying to get them to get out of it.
yeah. Jeffrey Chen says, any tips to get my daughter back into classical guitar? She was taking lessons for about 5 years, but in the last year has completely lost interest. I mean, what I would kind of ask, I don't know, for me, is what kind of music is she really interested in? Um, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm not the kind of teacher who kind of tries to keep my students interested in a particular type of like style within classical music, but even just classical music in general. I don't know. I'm generally trying to figure out what they want to play and then what tools they need to do that, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, but maybe she can hear some different kinds of classical guitar music. That might help. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe I would say probably just don't pressurize it. It's a pressurizing enough career,
Yeah, for
or
sure.
anyway, and maybe a change of teacher, maybe a change of environment, and you never know. I mean, she may pick it up years down the line and be really grateful for it.
Yeah, who knows?
It depends what reason she gave it up or stopped practicing or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. William Hill says, what technical books can you recommend for getting around the fingerboard of the guitar, getting out of the first position basically, and beginning to feel at home all over the fingerboard? Jeffrey McFadden has a book called Fretboard Harmony, which is quite good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked on that book last year with a student and was like flummoxed by the first exercise where you have to name the notes that you're playing. I was like,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's an amazing book.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Jeffrey's great, and that book is great. Okay, well, we kind of got onto like a technique pedagogy rant. This is interesting, but let's go now to well, really quickly before we do our first game, I'm going to ask you the gotcha question of the stream, which is, how do you define classical guitar? I know, nobody likes this question. It's always like,
How do you define it?
yeah. One person said they don't.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's cool.
Yeah, but
I don't know. I guess I don't want to say that.
did you stop yourself just in time from saying something rude?
Yeah. You know what I was going to say? This kind of sounds really creepy. But this is for music in general. Like you're playing other people's memories. That's very weird. It's just occurred to me that out loud that sounds really odd.
You're playing other people's memories. Yeah, that is strange, actually. Yeah, there's a
But
lot
it's
of
just,
ways to interpret that.
but I feel like every piece I play, it doesn't matter what it is. If someone asks me like, what are the emotions you feel in this piece? I always just say nostalgia. Like nostalgia is my go-to. I'm like, I think it's nostalgia. Because
I think
for
it's
sure it's like something.
yeah,
Someone else's nostalgia.
someone else's. Well, the composer's nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in that sense, it is literally playing someone else's thoughts because it's a composer's thoughts.
There you go.
There you
See?
go. Playing someone else's thoughts on a sixth string. Yeah. I think Jeffrey also was flummoxed by the first exercise, according to his comment in the McFadden book.
Stick with it.
So
Stick with
you're
it.
not alone, Rosie. You're not alone. Okay. Moving on. Okay, so let's play our first game, Rosie. You ready?
Okay.
This is the repertoire listening test game. Here is the part of the show where normally we would play the repertoire guessing game, where I embarrass the guest by playing clips from guitar recordings and having them guess the piece, composer, and player, and we talk about the music. Unfortunately, YouTube and/or Naxos, the label where many of the recordings come from, automatically block my videos when I do this due to copyright claims. Even though I know that short clips of copyrighted content are allowed under fair use when they are being used for commentary and/or education. Due to this delightful roadblock from our benevolent YouTube overlords, we'll be skipping this section, but if you'd like, you can check out the full stream of the repertoire guessing game on Facebook through the link below in the description box. Now, back to our fascinating guest. Amazing. Okay. Okay, we're gonna listen to another of your performances now, but a pre-recorded one. I think this is Estrelita. Or actually, you know what? Because we're in a good mood, I forgot to set up the second one, so I'm going to set it up now awkwardly on OBS while we're on the stream. So just entertain people for a minute while I get that set up. And we'll listen to the Bach now.
Okay, perfect.
So do you want to tell people about this Bach, why you play it, what you love about it while I set it up?
Yeah, so this was the first recording, the Bach, right?
Yes.
Yeah, this was the first recording I ever made. I made it with two of my best friends in Berlin, Nick and Hendrik. If you're watching this. If you're not, then you're bad friends. What can I say?
They can watch the archive later, you know?
But no, Nick and Hendrik, two of the most genuine, amazing guys. They've got a project called Open Strings Berlin,
Hmm.
which they set up must be 2 or 3 years ago now. They make super high quality recordings and videos in different locations that are somehow meant to express something about the piece. Their ethos is this super high quality video. They do an interview with the artist, and yeah, they're just such genuine, lovely guys. This recording took a really long time. I really underestimated what recording is. But yeah, and this is one of my favourite recordings because this is the first thing that was online of mine. It's the first thing that people really knew me for, and it's kind of the thing that like kick-started my career, or what there is of it, or what there was of it before before this
Before
corona.
coronavirus, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I would like be forever grateful to them because it was also the reason that I got my sponsorship from Augustine Strings. Um, so yeah.
Cool. And it's the prelude from BWV 998, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Okay,
great.
let's listen to some Bach. Oh, and just to warn you, Rosie, you may not hear the sound through the speakers. Only the audience will hear it. So
Okay, but can
don't
they
be.
still hear me? Mute something.
No, I'm gonna mute everything. Don't worry. But just so you know, don't be alarmed that you don't hear anything.
Okay, fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
Wonderful.
I
Beautiful.
can have it through without the nerves. That's lovely.
Yes, exactly. That was great. I love that prelude. I miss playing that prelude. It's been, I'd say, like 3 years now since I played that piece.
Mm.
It's so much fun to play, actually.
Yeah, probably me too. I mean, I don't really keep it in my program right now, but I played it for my bachelor
Okay.
recital, um, which was a really nice experience actually because I um, I've become accustomed to being quite terrified
Oh, oh, I think we
of
lost.
trauma, and I feel like the 998 was the first time that I felt really, obviously because I'd recorded it, spent so much time with it, like um, I felt like I felt comfortable in terms of memory playing it on stage, which was kind of a big thing for me at that time.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. That was really great. It's a nice video too. Yeah, they did a really good job with the filming and the editing.
Yes, it's actually in the building. It's in a building that where their business is measuring stuff, like making. This is hard to explain. Um, Measuring like the size of A4 and stuff, like making sure that the size of paper is regulated.
Wow.
Hmm.
So you're measuring your rubato and you're measuring your.
Exactly. And a little known fact about that recording, because obviously no one's ever asked me about this, is that obviously we recorded the audio and the video separately. And that video is recorded in like a kind of conference room. And because they couldn't just stop business while we were in there recording, there were like tons of people walking in all the time and just looking at the room to be like, oh yeah, this would be interesting for us to use as a conference room. So actually, that recording is like if you look from my view, there's like tons of German people walking through all the time.
That's hilarious. Nice. Jeffrey Chan says 99A is one of my favorites. You sounded wonderful. Nice.
Thank you, thank you.
And Juan Lopez says Billy Strings want to do a collab with you. So there you go.
Cool.
Nice. Okay, well, let's move on to. You said that one of your big things is talking about being a musician and mental health, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Where does this come into your story?
Oh, well, all of it, I suppose.
Okay, yeah.
um, Through oh yeah, because I'm going to explain like the last years that bring me to my current life very very briefly, because I know that I took about an hour talking before, but we kind of got to this stage where I was going to move school because I was not sure that that it was working out with Zora, and I wrote him an email. I said, I think I'm not going to come back next year, and he was. I can't remember if it was he was shocked but not surprised, or if he was surprised but not shocked, or one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of parted on good terms. I then went to study with Johan Fostier in Tilburg, the Fontes Hogeschool, and I had a good time there. Johan was an incredible teacher. He gave me back that confidence that I really needed, the confidence that I'd lost in my playing, but it kind of coincided really badly for me with where it was because, as you all know, living in Holland, so living in where do you live? You live in
Utrecht. I live in Utrecht, but I study in Maastricht.
so you live in Holland. So
Yeah, yeah.
in Netherlands, there's like Holland, which is
Yeah,
Amsterdam,
yeah. I
and
live in Holland. Yeah, I'm in like the Randstad. So yeah.
yeah, and there everybody speaks English, and you basically don't really need to learn to speak Dutch. You can kind of live, let's say, most of your life speaking English.
I suppose. Although I think to make a business, you kind of have to. I don't. Anyway, sorry. That's a kind of an aside, but
So
yeah.
when I went to Tilburg, everything was in Dutch.
Right.
So they told me like, oh yeah, your lessons could be in English, and every single lecture was in Dutch. So and also I don't know why, but we had like a really heavy curriculum program there. So I had history, art history, philosophy, psychology, music history, harmony analysis, all kinds of things, entrepreneurship, all these different classes, and
Oh.
every single thing was in Dutch.
Hmm.
Um, and I basically just fell apart. It's an amazing feeling. You feel so lonely, surrounded by people. I couldn't really have proper friends because everyone spoke Dutch. Um, and I had to learn. So I learned Dutch and I didn't go to classes, but I just would write down every word that I heard in my lectures phonetically in English, and then I would say it into Google Translate. It was around that time that they had that feature on Google Translate. So they made that feature, and I was just saying words into Google Translate every night, writing them down, the words in Dutch, and then learning them. So this was like my system. And I was basically just massively depressed. I had my first real existential crisis at that time, and I just struggled my way through the second year. It coincided with, it was around the same time that Johan's father passed away, so it was a very volatile time. The only person that I could really rely on there was also struggling massively. So it was just, it was very bad. I was pretty sure that I wanted to stop playing guitar. And I was discussing with Rene, and he sort of said to me, why don't you try just another year? You might as well do another year with guitar, and come and study with me. So I went to Milwaukee. I dropped out of school in Tilburg. I actually dropped out of my whole bachelor degree, and I went to Milwaukee to study with Rene, and had lessons kind of every day, every other day. Started again with my technique, and kind of just built myself up from basically nothing. I felt like I sort of had nothing to lose at that point. Honestly, I couldn't have cared less.
Hmm.
um, so I just started again and gradually built on, built on my technique, just starting again, which I've been playing guitar 13 years at the time, and it was the most unsettling thing I've ever had to do. So I struggled, but I kind of got there. I played in my first competition, um, and I had some master classes playing the prelude from the Suite Compostelana.
Oh, I love that
And
piece.
yeah, me too. And I was playing it, and I played it in a bunch of master classes. I played it for Alvaro Pieri,
Hmm.
Lukas Krzyzewski, Enno Forst. I played for a bunch of people, and everybody told me something different. And this is gonna sound silly because by this point I've been playing music for a really long time. But it was the first time in my life that I realized that I could have these heroes in guitar, and that they would all have different opinions. That there was actually no right way, because people that I respected just as much as each other had these super conflicting opinions about how this piece should be. And then I had this kind of rebirth, thinking, okay, well, what about if I just play it how I like it then?
Hmm.
uh, which is a kind of late realization to come to, but it really changed. It really changed the way that I think about everything. And then I couldn't feasibly stay in America. Obviously, couldn't really afford the tuition. So I decided to return. I went to Belgium, in Leuven with Rafaela Smits, and spent a year kind of consolidating the things that I've been doing with Renee, especially with technique. A lot more making my own decisions, having to justify my own decisions as well. And then now I've spent the last 2 years just sort of playing concerts and having this, I will say nomadic existence, but I sort of feel like I've been given this platform through Instagram, which has led me to be writing this blog about, which tends to focus really around those mental health in music and also music education, and sort of questioning the concepts of music education. Um, so it sort of all came. The reason I'm so interested in it is because of the journey that I made personally from being a kid who knew nothing better. Um, so basically, just only being formed by the things that were in my education when I was younger, with no real outside input. So I feel like I'm hyper aware of the way that music education can affect you, especially when you're young,
Hmm.
the little pressures of it, and um, especially now looking into just in general, this life is such a strange life. This career, it's not fitting into a job position. It's forging out of fire a career that you want to play, a concert that someone else hasn't played before. in a venue they've not played in before, playing music that perhaps they didn't play. Fixed there's no fixed career in this. If you're going to be a performer, so it's always just finding little ways to make a living, really. And obviously, our brains don't react well to uncertainty. So it's interesting to examine really what's going on in your minds throughout the whole the whole experience of being a musician, which can mean a lot of time alone, can mean a lot of time not at home, in environments that you don't know, with people you've never met. All of these things, it's no wonder really that it can be such a strain on our sort of mental well-being, really.
I would also argue that like beyond like what you say is true, that when you have to perform, there's no one formula, and it's actually kind of the point is to be unique, first of all, which is a strange concept in classical music, but shouldn't be, actually. But beyond that, too, I think like even beyond the performance aspect, it's also forging your own path in the sense that I don't think realistically, especially for classical guitarists, there's really a career in only just performing and just being on stage. And the thing is, even the being on stage and the performing thing takes a whole other skill set that people don't even realize necessarily when they're going to school, of like networking, being organized, sending proposals, having a good program, having an interesting project, looking for funding, all these things, right? So, and beyond that too, you also kind of have to be good as an administrator so that you can help facilitate events, which helps you network, which helps you meet people and come up with new interesting projects. So I guess the point I'm making, and plus on top of that, most of us have to teach to some extent. So not only is it just the performing, but it's also like all these things that we have to do to be successful are, there's no like formula for it, you know. And even if someone came up with a formula, it would be outdated in 5 or 10 years because the landscape would change. So
I think it's also interesting to define your own personal success.
yeah,
Um, that's a thing that in the music industry in general can end up being quite problematic, is that there's a certain idea of success that we all adopt when we start learning, or we learn
yeah,
that this is what's successful. And for a lot of people, that actually doesn't bring a massive amount of happiness. Which is, I think, when you get this idea of like this tortured artist because they don't enjoy the things that also should make them happy.
yeah.
I actually think that that's quite, it's a myth that this can be a sustainable way of living.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we all sort of need to, in general, or also as teachers, we should be preparing this mindset a little bit more. Like, you can really choose the things that you enjoy about music. You can choose the performances you like to do.
Yeah, and you can choose which things you include in your career that aren't performing, right? Like you can choose whether you want to start a concert series, whether you want to start a live stream or do a blog or whatever. And I think most people who have a long-term career aren't just on stage. Like it's basically impossible in the first place. But also it's not really fulfilling for most people, I think, to only do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so, especially while, I mean, I know at least like a lot of the online rhetoric at the moment is a lot more about acceptance and about like cumulative knowledge in a group rather than personal success. And I think that like personal elite success is a big part of what classical music has been built around as a culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's really interesting that a lot of people are branching out in different ways with different kinds of projects. Not even necessarily that give things back, but just that are giving different opportunities to get into music and actually to enjoy music as well, without it always having to be in this very high-powered sense in the industry.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, I know it's a difficult thing to talk about, actually, as well. Um, but it's a very difficult job. I mean, actually, like physically in the mind, it's a very difficult job to be in a situation where, and I'm talking about performing musicians, to be in a position where you actually don't know for sure that you will have a job in, you know, a certain amount of months or years, or and that you actually, aside from your own personal measuring stick of how well you're doing, you don't really have any scalability of your job. As soon as you get into it, that's sort of the job that you're doing for life. And you can you can gather different performances that you think are more important, different accolades, different um, yeah, different venues that you can, count as your achievements. But actually, it's a job that leaves you in quite a lot of stasis throughout the whole of your life. So you may be doing the same job on the same sort of level, um, in, sort of layman's eyes, from when you're 20 to when you're 60. Um, and that's something that's kind of difficult in the human psyche, because it's difficult to have a job where you feel that you don't necessarily improve, or that you're not necessarily recognized more than you were, certain amount of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, the other problem is that the recognition is kind of a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of factors that affect it, right? Like, sort of
Mm.
what you play. I don't know. I mean, it also depends how you measure recognition too. I mean,
But I think that's the thing, is that not a lot of us really make our own measuring scale for
right?
our success. A lot of us use this sort of pseudo scale that we're given,
Yeah,
or that presented to us through the education that we're brought up on, and then
right.
not
It's
a
like I
lot.
have to do X to be worth it or whatever.
Exactly, and if you don't really feel that, or if you don't necessarily equate that with success, that's going to leave this massive gap where you feel like, well, I've achieved this, why am I not happy?
Right.
I think is a level that quite a lot of people reach. In
Yeah, it's also a question of like, is that kind of happiness of like doing what you think you're supposed to do worth having? I mean,
Yeah,
I've been listening to a lot of Slavoj Žižek lately, and as crazy as he is, one of the things I appreciate is that he's always like, I don't want happiness. He says like the happiness in the conventional sense of like achieving your goals is actually misery, because then where do you go from there? I mean, it replaces the goal replaces itself, right? So
yeah. I mean, I think when we talk about work-related goals, it's easy to think that you can really achieve those things. I think that in general, if your goals tend to be a little bit more fluid, for instance, I want to play to audiences that enjoy my music. That's something that even if you do it once, it doesn't mean that you've achieved it, and that you then it's no longer, that it's then obsolete. That's
mm-hmm.
something that will continue to be your feeling of having success, and something that you can have on a regular basis. It doesn't necessarily mean that run out
Yeah,
because people have been playing once. I think it's just trying to make those little goals that maybe are a little more tangible, and a little more relaxed as well. The things that are really important to you.
yeah, and also to be aware that there's no end to them. I mean, you don't once you achieve something, it's just time to make a new goal. It's not like that gives you self worth.
Your goal can be like open ended. You
Yeah,
can be in your goal status and still want to, do the same thing.
yeah. I suppose.
Because like
Yeah,
goal is being happy. It doesn't mean that once you're happy, you're like, okay, well, I've done it now.
yeah. I mean,
Move on.
also, I mean, but it is also good to have goals that are like tangible and measurable. I don't know. You have to kind of. It's a balancing act, I think.
For sure, but I think those things are more like they're like tangible goals facilitates your movement towards a sort of um, more abstract goal in your life,
Mm-hmm.
um, which obviously can't just be playing this piece, or
Yeah,
playing. So you know,
yeah. Not necessarily. I think one of the bigger things in classical guitar, I don't know if you would agree, but it's just like some people need to get a little bit liberated from the expectations of like the traditional path to success, whatever that is. Which doesn't mean you don't try to do the things that have been set out that work, but I think our well, maybe we're better than some instruments, but I think we could do with more people coming up with an individual artistic goal that sets them apart. I don't know,
mm,
rather than playing the same things. I don't know, but it's not even about the rep, because you can play the same rep as other people and just have something unique that you say with it. So I don't know.
I think there's like a large part of in my life that sort of helped me through this period of trying to divorce that idea of success, or traditional success of being a musician, is because the influence of my parents was always something non-musical. So my dad's a carpenter, my mum was a librarian when I was growing up, and now she's a teacher. And I always had the idea that success was not really in the work that you do, but in the things that your work can afford you. And so,
Right.
my dad's work and my mom's work both afforded them the chance to be sociable and have friends in their work, to work at small goals and achieve those things, create little projects, help people, and then always, having dinner together as a family in the evening. So for me, that is more my idea of a successful lifestyle
Hmm.
than I think a lot of other people have had the privilege to have, really. Um, but yeah, I think I wrestle a lot with this idea of success because I think that the path to success is what path to a certain lifestyle, and for most people, they're not even sure that that lifestyle is something that really interests them. I mean, if you wanted to be a musician, like for instance Benjamin was, you live out of a suitcase and you don't have a relationship with anybody in your family. You have a temporary relationship with audience members that you can rarely meet or get to know. Um, so I think that, yeah, the traditional idea of success in the classical music world is one that we should probably all question.
Yeah, but
Not the path, but also because of the end goal. Because I'm pretty sure that most people would not be totally happy with the end goal either.
yeah, I mean, but it's a question of defining what are your parameters, right? Because like Lukasz Krybachevsky, in an interview, I heard him talking about like how he plays more when he feels like he needs to financially, or not necessarily financially, but professionally, and then at other times he says no, so he can spend time with his family and live a normal life and cook nice meals and be a father and a family member and all those things. Not that everyone has to do that. I mean, some people just don't want to,
And
which
that's
is
a situation that not a lot of people will manage to achieve.
right. Yeah, and that's fair. But at the same time, if you have like even if you develop a modest career, it's a question of what are your priorities and what are you happy doing, right?
Bring you success. What
Sorry.
will really bring you success for you personally?
Yeah.
Because success is different for all of us.
Right. But I mean, I guess what the thing that I thought was unique about what he said was that he said like the fact that he would say no to things in order to live the life he wanted to live. I think that's maybe a little bit rare with classical musicians in terms of like what we're told we should do. You know, um, we're not necessarily given a model like that where it's like you can move forward, develop what you want, but also take care of yourself and your family and your health and all those things on the side. Like or not on the side, but that are important parts of your life too, equally important. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's just kind of missing, at least from what I've seen in classical music education. Like there's so much pressure to like just constantly move forward in it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why the yeah. I mean, there's a lot to say about the construct of musical education as it stands at the moment.
Yeah.
Uh, but that's definitely the one thing that I feel is like a positive takeaway from it, is that you don't have to be defined by somebody else's definition of success.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Do you have any like ideas about practicing, about technique, any ways that you like to practice? Any tips you have for people who also practice?
Um, well, I think make it positive. This sounds really silly. You will not believe like the amount of hate that I get online for saying this. But um, the things you enjoy in your life is no coincidence. Um, there are you can create positive experiences. You can literally create positive pathways in your brain. The synapses, different chemicals that are released when doing things, by the atmosphere that you introduce things in your life. So, for instance, if you start a new hobby and you are in the kind of environment where people are laughing at you because you're bad at it, you probably will not end up doing that anymore, because your brain's natural reaction is, okay, well, obviously this made me feel bad, so I won't do this again. So trying to just create more of a positive stimulus around your practice can really change the way that you're working. I think a lot of us work out of guilt. I hear that a lot. I write about this a lot. Is this idea that your practice owns you instead of you owning your practice. And I really, really love in yoga, they call it my practice. So they say, like, I'm going to do this stretch because I feel that it helps my practice. And I think even just changing the way you think about, the way you talk about the work that you do, um, can really help you to actually achieve the things you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just having to like have a little trick or like a certain technical exercise that will get you somewhere, enjoying something um, will allow you to do this work that you need to do to get where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I find, I guess, a different way of doing that, which I try to do, is to set goals for whatever passage I'm working on or whatever, and be happy when I achieve them, instead of just like immediately moving on to like what's the next problem, and enjoy the fact that I solved something and I improved something, and then play it again in a way where I'm enjoying that process that's now easier,
Mm.
so
I
that
think also learning to live with and learning to like sit with the things that you don't do well, learning to sit with the mistakes that you make, also makes a massive difference because most of the time when we're practicing, we're going to be observing and listening to things that we want to change.
yeah,
Um, but I feel like it's so important that you accept the things that you don't do well, in order to do them better, because actually that's what most of your time is spent listening to.
yeah,
And actually enjoying your performance is it's much more interesting for the audience to see someone who enjoys what they do rather than someone who makes a few mistakes, for instance. So training your brain to really enjoy performing, to enjoy playing, like the actual physical feeling of playing, I think that's so important. So not just always working towards something, but always also working in something, enjoying the place that you're in currently.
mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I think so, yeah, because
Ho-
we work a lot towards, the future.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
playing music and being able to enjoy it is about like now, like being able to harness that feeling of being where you are.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Juan Lopez is asking, how can I build a musical narrative in my playing?
interesting. Listen from yourself. I think if you have a teacher or you're listening to lots of recordings or you enjoy listening to other people, try to quieten the noise a little bit in your life, and listen to the things that you enjoy. What do you do instinctively? Um, to a certain extent, we can't really fight our musical instincts, however much we try to accent different notes when we're left, when you're in a nerve-wracking situation or you are suddenly on stage, you may find that you play things just instinctively, especially with articulation. You can do a lot of preparation of things, but if you don't really believe in it, then it's unlikely that you will ever really not feel at odds with it. You will not feel at odds. It's unlikely that you will feel at ease with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So do everything with as much conviction as you can. And when people used to say that to me, I used to think that it meant act the part better. But what it really means is like trust the part that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So trust the instincts that you have.
Yeah, and I think also, on that note of like, if you don't believe in something, it's not going to happen. That's not to say that you don't learn from teachers or others, but it's kind of like you can only assimilate what actually makes sense to you, in the long run. Like, of
Yeah.
course, you can try the things your teacher's telling you. You can do everything they say for your exam or for the next lesson or whatever. But I think when it comes to this stage, especially, you
Mm.
you kind of have to be doing what actually landed for you. And sometimes your teacher tells you something that seems counterintuitive, and once you try it enough times, it really like fits your narrative and fits what makes sense to you. But oftentimes it doesn't, or sometimes it doesn't. And discerning between those things is tricky, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's something, it's a bit weird. I don't know if I've ever really had. Well, a good example of that is like with Rennie. He can say so many things about the ergonomics of your playing. But one thing that he said to me was always like, "But in the end, I don't know. You're the only one that knows if this
Yeah.
feels right." And that's the same for everything that your teacher says to you.
Yeah.
A lot of people say be cynical, as advice to students. Be cynical of what your teacher says. Question everything, because that's really what this role is put there to help you, is through the answers that you want to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not studying a master's at the moment is because I just feel like I don't have enough questions at the moment to really reasonably study with someone.
Right. Yeah. I
So I
think,
think it's just,
yeah.
yeah, it's important to follow the things that you believe. And if your teacher is really against almost everything that you want to do, maybe look for a different teacher.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeffrey is saying maybe it comes down to trust to the teacher. I mean, I think trust is good, but I've seen a lot of cases where people trust teachers to the point of like worship, and that's really detrimental, I think, in the long run. Um,
Yeah,
even and
trust.
it's not necessarily the teacher's fault. It can just be that, you know, the student takes it to the point where they don't question things themselves, and then it doesn't help their playing in the end that much.
Sure. I mean, I've been in that situation before. Um, it's not healthy really for either of you.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where two people devoid of any bad intention can create a really toxic environment for each other.
Yeah.
Um, and as a teacher, you always need to be aware that you have the upper hand in that situation. You're the one who calls the shots, and you are the one who can say to your student, "Okay, well, what do you think? You can choose what you
Hmm.
want to do here." I would say that saying "I would do this, but you don't have to do that" is just one of the array of manipulative phrases that people tend to say.
Hmm.
So if your teacher is seemingly giving you a choice, but they're always saying, "Well, I would do this, but you don't have to," um, again, maybe this is not the best fit for you. I'm not saying you always have to change teachers. I know I change teachers a lot. I'm not saying change teachers, but at the end of the day, your teacher is just a person with the same pair of ears that you have. Perhaps they have a little bit more knowledge, but when it comes down to enjoying music, knowledge doesn't mean that much. Your instincts should guide you, and if you find that it's not working with a teacher, then you shouldn't feel afraid or feel that you have to stay with a teacher because of status or for fear of upsetting the teacher. If you think that your teacher is going to be upset because you're leaving them, then this is probably one of those situations where this has become a bit of a toxic environment.
Yeah. Perhaps. I mean, I think with what teachers say about whether how we do this, but you can do whatever you want to do, it sort of depends a lot on with how their kind of general attitude is towards your end performance, right? Um, yeah, it's a hard line to walk, I think, for anybody.
For sure, I think if it's just more of I do feel like if teachers are always teaching by just example,
Yeah.
what they're being is not really a teacher. I feel like the role of a teacher is a lot more to get involved with what the student wants,
Yeah.
rather than just like, oh well, I would do this, but if you don't follow me, then that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I find as a teacher, I'm often trying to ask the student what they think, what they feel, what their intuition tells them, or what do they see in the music. And sometimes they surprise me, but basically what I want to know is if they're thinking about it, like, and from an analytical standpoint, both technically and musically, right? Like, if they can show that that's happening, that process is happening, and they're questioning things and they're coming up with solutions, I'm generally pretty happy, unless something they're doing is really hampering the music to a large extent, and then I might point it out. But yeah, I'd much prefer to have a student who comes to different conclusions but thinks deeply about it than someone who just does whatever I say.
I don't think you really need to also like know 100% what you're doing. That's obviously one of the big goals of teaching small kids, so kids that are not being really sentient about their playing yet. Like I would say the ages are probably 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 tends to be for some reason a different ballpark, but kids sort of in those 4 years that they often have no idea why they're doing what they do, but
Hmm.
probably it's because sort of accumulated knowledge of listening to music and stuff that they actually have quite good instinct. And I feel like my job as a teacher is just to try to help them improve the things that they can't do, so the physical things about guitar, without hampering in any way the instinctiveness that they already bring to the instrument. Because I feel like most kids who can play physically to a certain ability um, tend to have an instinctive ability for musical shapes. And yeah, I think it's something, it's very difficult. I think that's, for me, that's the most difficult part of being a teacher, is
Yeah.
to try not to change what somebody's doing. And they don't have to have a reason. And I mean, my teacher also used to say that to me, like, if you can justify it, you can do it. That's also, like, something so mean to say to someone, because a lot of the time someone's reasoning for something is like, well, sing this melody, and that's not really justifying something.
Yeah.
um, I feel like music is often indescribable, um, with words, and I feel like that also is your job as a teacher, is like to listen deeply for the student, not only teaching them to listen deeply for themselves, but also helping them by doing that for them, especially kids. I mean, now I'm really talking like young ages students.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Alrighty. Well, let's move from these super deep topics to another game. Rosie.
Okay.
No, this is
I feel
good.
like my voice, like my tone is so low and everything. Oh my god, just
Yeah,
me
yeah.
talking.
We've learned about Rosie's entire philosophy of teaching. No, not entire.
But it's constantly changing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is I try to just be like ever evolving. Especially, I do a lot of like psychological research, which has really changed the way that I teach, and also the way that I like reparent myself in a way, if you can call it that, through
Yeah.
the teaching. Um, but yeah, I feel like it's almost like an obsession now. But I'm just obsessed with how every tiny thing can have like this knock-on effect.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so sorry. Okay. Yes. Again.
No, it's good. Um, take a drink from your gin and tonic, and we'll have a game here. Okay, this is classical guitar. Would you rather?
Ooh. Okay.
Yes. So,
With people.
sorry.
With what?
With what? Would you rather have shaky hands or shitty nails?
Nails. Bad nails.
Bad
Every
nails.
time.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I guess it's better that you can control your hands at least, even if your tone is not like what you want exactly.
Also, the first 3 years I played with flesh, and I still sometimes just cut my thumbnail off because I like the flesh. So.
Ah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Um, so let's say you're back in school. So go back a
Yeah.
couple years in your brain. Would you rather? It's March, so it's like you started learning your program in like August, sort of September. You picked your pieces. You maybe changed a few things in October. You get
Yeah.
to March and you've learned everything,
Yeah.
and your teacher has given you like a lot of ideas for articulation, dynamics, etc. And you've had your own ideas and you've like put it together, and it's basically there. It's coming. You're starting to run stuff for people and get ready for your exam. Would you rather change half of your exam program or change all of your articulations, fingerings, and dynamics, and you're like convinced that these changes are good ones?
Half my program.
Half your program. Okay. Yeah, you said you learn pieces fast, so
I learn pieces really fast.
yeah.
So.
Okay. There. That's easy. My whole setup was for nothing. Um,
No, but it's good. I also, I'm like bad with changing articulations and fingerings and stuff. For
uh,
the Allegro, another fun fact about this Open Strings Berlin recording is that in the Allegro I use the same fingering the whole way through, and it's not even something logical, because I was convinced that even if I had to change strings in a really weird way, that just because I could remember the pattern with the right hand, it would make sense. And the pattern was AMIM. What kind of heathen does something like that?
yeah, that sounds brutal, actually.
I think it's because it worked in one section, and I was like, okay, so I'm just gonna
It's
keep
gonna
that.
work everywhere. Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that's brutal. Also, if people have would you rather questions, let us know. Oh, Jeffrey's wondering, how do you learn pieces fast? How do you do it, Rosie? What's your secret?
I'm good at sight reading, and I don't know, I'm good at sight reading. Sorry.
Okay, good sight reading.
It
Just
was
be just be better at sight reading. It's fine. Okay.
it was a childhood thing. Like I said, I never learned a piece for the first 5 years I played guitar. I always sight read. I thought that was how you meant to do it. So
Okay.
I just basically practiced sight reading for 5 years.
Oh, okay. Well, that's useful then. Would you rather play a concert when you haven't slept for an entire day, or would you rather eat a super hot chili pepper that you can't handle right before you go on stage?
Chili pepper.
Chili pepper. Okay. So sleep is important to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Everybody else has said no sleep. Apparently, a lot of other guitarists just don't sleep very well, even the night before a concert.
Okay, but I like spice as well, so that's fine.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
No, but I can't. I've had such bad experiences of sleeping really badly, and the thing that happens is it just makes me really dopey.
Mm,
Um, So one thing that I worry about on stage more than anything is memory. I feel like I'm just gonna like notes are gonna like disappear out of my mind,
Yeah.
um, and and if I don't sleep and I have a memory falter,
Yeah.
um, I'm like the dopiest person in the world. I would just look at my left hand like,
Yeah, that
oh.
would be bad. Yeah. All right. Would you rather only be allowed to play music after or before 1950? After.
After.
After. Okay. Yeah, same here. Would you rather learn and memorize in a week for a performance one of these two pieces, the Chaconne
Yeah.
or Sonata Romantica, the Ponce?
Sonata Romantica.
Okay.
Haunting.
It's longer though, but I guess easier to memorize than Bach.
And also the Bach thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that would be brutal. I'm playing the Chaconne now, and if I had to memorize it in a week, I wouldn't perform it, or I'd perform it, but it would be bad.
Yeah, I could probably sing along if I could like sing Bach.
Then
That
it's fun. Yeah.
would, no,
Nice.
that's not.
Awesome. Okay, we're gonna listen to another video before we wrap up our chat. So,
What?
this is Ponce, right? Also, actually,
This is Ponce, yeah.
what
I
is it?
love Ponce. This is Estrelita. This recording also means a lot to me. I spent 3 weeks in Spain, in Carrion, where Rene has his course, playing concerts. The, I mean, I guess people maybe don't know about this part, but anyway, about a certain amount of years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 10. I think it had there's an amazing trailer for it, an amazing like promo video for the festival. This guy called Fred Shepherd or Federico Shepherd, depending on whether he's feeling Spanish or American, moved from Milwaukee. No, he moved from Wisconsin to Spain to find a more peaceful way of life. And he was a guitar builder, and he decided that he would start a series of concerts on the Camino Frances, which is a pilgrimage from Saint-Pierre-du-Jean, or somewhere in France,
Mm-hmm.
all the way through to Santiago de Compostela. And this place where this video was recorded is on the midway point. So the concerts that you do in this place are amazing. You have a different audience every single night, and also it's these people who they're very fertile for sort of amazing, almost well, most of them are religious, but also otherworldly experiences. So often you'll play concerts in these churches and people will be sobbing their hearts out, or these are the kind of, it's the situation where you'll be changing people's lives in concerts, because a lot of the reasons that people do this pilgrimage is not religious anymore. A lot of it has to do with finding something within yourself. A lot of people take sabbaticals from work and do this walk. So most people are struggling with at least some kind of demons in their lives. Yeah, so it's a really special, amazing place to play a concert. And I was there with Sondre. I don't know if you know Sondre. Sondre Holm.
I
Actually,
don't know him, but I know who he is. Yeah.
amazing guy. We had super fun in Spain in September, and yeah, and we recorded this piece. Um, we had a lot of talks, a lot of epiphanies about what kind of repertoire you should be playing in concerts, which things people really want to hear, and I felt um, really supported and really buoyed up by Sondre and these little conversations about sort of easier music to listen to, and yeah, just the whole concept of what we're doing in this career where we are entertainers
Mm-hmm.
but also artists. But anyways, that was a big long explanation. But this is Estrelita. It was written by Ponce um, in the 20s. Guys, 26,
Cool.
1926. I say that.
Yeah, I when I opened the video for this, I was pleasantly surprised to see the stage and remember my time in Carrion last summer. So, yeah, it's a nice place to play.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
The audience there are crazy. People are, they really want it.
Yeah, it's good. Awesome. Okay, let's listen to some Ponce.
This is made on a guitar, made by Fred,
Ah,
Frederico Shepherd.
cool.
So,
Awesome. Okay, Ponce time.
yes.
Wonderful. Very nice.
It's a piece.
Yeah. Beautiful little piece.
Yeah, it's
Very
amazing.
nostalgic.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, before we play the lightning round and end, I want to ask you what you think the future of classical guitar is, or where are we going as an instrument?
So bright. So many people are doing so many amazing things. The internet is incredible. It means that we can all see each other. We can all benefit from what everyone else is doing. Um, yeah, I feel like a lot's going to happen. A lot of new projects. A lot of um, yeah, a lot of advancement in repertoire, bringing us a lot closer to the traditional classical world, and also sort of fusing us with other genres of guitar, other performance styles. I feel like probably the classical music performance structure at the moment might change quite a lot. And if I had to put a prediction, like money on it, I would say that the way that concert halls work is going to change a lot after this particular period of time. So this lockdown period, I feel like a lot's going to change, especially with the online
Mm-hmm.
culture. So yeah, I think that's going to be a big thing.
For
Um,
sure.
and yeah, there's also like a lot of people who have big platforms on social media, which is kind of exciting for guitarists as well because it means that our audience is constantly expanding. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of people like if I can say one thing about like having a little bit of life online would be that people should stop being worried about a zero sum culture. So um, people shouldn't be worried that if someone else is becoming really popular, that they won't become popular, or that someone else becoming more popular makes you inherently less popular because of that. Every little advancement that we do in the guitar world is kind of to the benefit of all of us, which I think is like a really interesting thing.
Yeah, I feel like every time I do one of these streams, I say that the guitar is mostly grassroots based in the sense that we don't necessarily have a lot of, I don't know, like big media behind us, you could say, as far as like music goes. So what that means is that when there are more guitarists doing more interesting things, there are more audience members being created who are interested in it, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. We're
So,
discovering the guitar all the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really feel like to have any longevity, first of all, within your own community, and as a guitarist, you have to be reaching out and making connections and inviting people into what the guitar is doing, what you're doing with the guitar, and what the guitar world is, basically. But also, that means that there's more opportunities for the people around you who you can connect with, other guitarists. And to view it that way is a lot more positive and
Yeah,
also
definitely.
fosters better
Yeah.
relationships with each other, too. So, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
yeah,
So,
cool. All right, well, we're going to play a lightning round, Rosie, before we finish. So I'm just gonna give you like this or this, this or this, and you have to pick as fast as possible. Okay, cats or dogs?
no cats.
Okay, very good. Bream or Segovia?
Bream.
Okay, Liszt or Chopin?
List.
Oh, interesting. Free stroke or rest stroke?
Free stroke.
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, rest stroke is hard. Breakfast or dinner?
Breakfast.
Oh wow, breakfast. Okay, interesting. Team Edward or Team Jacob?
Sorry?
Team Edward or Team Jacob?
Oh, is it Twilight?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm
The
glad you
wolf
actually.
team.
Sorry.
Jacob. Jacob.
Okay, I'm glad you actually got the reference because a lot of people are just like, what? South Park or The Simpsons?
South Park.
Yes, me too. South Park is great. Thibaut Garcia or Andrea Di Vitis? Uh,
Rude. Yeah.
okay. Villalobos or Rodrigo?
Rodrigo.
Ponce or Tedesco?
Ponce.
Oh, interesting. Vanilla or chocolate?
Vanilla.
Europe or North America?
Europe.
Yeah. Horowitz or Rubinstein?
Hmm. Um. Okay, I'm gonna go Rubinstein.
Okay.
I think it's more.
Um, restoration of the composer's intentions or personal interpretation?
Do what you want.
Do what you want. So personal interpretation. Okay.
YOLO.
Solo or chamber?
Uh, ooh. Solo.
Okay. Beer or wine?
Beer.
Okay. Mammals or reptiles?
Mammals.
Okay. Concert or masterclass?
Concerts.
Contemporary or classical slash romantic guitar repertoire?
Contemporary.
Campanella or regular scales?
Cabanela.
Yeah, me too. Sweet or salty?
Salty.
Tremolo or scales?
Scales.
Okay. Cool. Well, is there anything you want to plug? What are your projects going on right now? Is there anything you want to tell
I
people
want
about?
to quick thanks, basically. I want to thank Augustine Strings for making the best strings and for supporting me for so many years. I don't know how you put up with me, but thank you for answering all of my emails and yeah, thank you for all of your great strings. Also, Augustine makes such great strings. If you haven't tried Augustine strings, I play the Imperial Reds and also the Paragon, which is their new carbon blend. I want to say thank you to Guitar Lift. A lot of people ask me about this on Instagram, and I will just briefly show you this. This is the Guitar Lift. It's a relatively new, but also already quite respected guitar support in the guitar world. Felix, you are a saint. And it's honestly the most comfortable thing I've ever played with. I have almost no pain. It feels just like the guitar is like part of my body. It's crazy. Absolutely recommend it. I play the small plate. Thank you for Tone Bass for always letting me speak almost as much as I have on this session and letting me say whatever I want. Yeah, and thank you for having me on. It's been really enjoyable and really lovely.
Good. I'm
And the
glad.
games are super cool. I really wish that my whole career could be just people asking me lightning questions.
It's fun because you don't have to think too much. You're just like, this is the answer. Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so
Well,
much for coming on, Rosie.
thank you.
It's been awesome and great playing, and I'm sure I'll hear more from you in the future, and hopefully we meet in person one day. So,
Yeah, I hope so too. This has
yeah,
been novel, each other through
yeah, for sure.
Zoom.
Awesome. Well, and thanks everyone for watching. Um, Please tune in on what? One second. Oh, on Sunday, I'm having Felipe Neves Cural here on Sunday, great Portuguese guitarist, because he couldn't join when he was supposed to last Friday. So Felipe is on Sunday, and then Evan Taucher is on Monday or Tuesday. Sorry, Tuesday the 5th, and then I have Pablo Villafuerte next week also. So tune in next week for Felipe, Evan, and Pablo. And thank you, Rosie. And if people want to rewatch, there will be a archive of this on YouTube in a few days. So yes, and the rest of the episodes are on YouTube as well. And check out Rosie's stuff. I think I put your Facebook and Instagram in the description.
Yeah,
So
I only really do Instagram. That's like a spoiler alert for anyone that only has Facebook.
so follow her on Instagram, not on Facebook. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Bye bye,
Thanks.
everybody.